afternoon. Hope everyone's well on this humid Monday afternoon. Just 48 hours on from that very disappointing defeat to Hull City at the MKM Stadium on Saturday, and Norwich City obviously looking ahead to a home tie at Carrow Road tomorrow evening against Huddersfield Town. Adam Harvey joined by Samuel Seaman. Before I get into the team news, Sam, and give everyone a bit of a rundown, 48 hours on from that whole game, obviously we travelled up there and back on the same day. Any more reflections on that? Obviously, it could be quite raw straight after the game, but obviously 48 hours now on, how do you reflect on it?
Well, it looks like they're getting better, and I actually looked at the numbers for our tactics board video, which is going to go out later today, and the stats are getting better with every game. The performances feel like they're getting slightly better with every game, but unfortunately, we're just seeing those same patterns. Every time Norwich go out on the pitch, it's a strong start, a little bit of a lull in the middle, where they, characteristically concede a goal or two and then lose the mentality for a bit, then try and rescue whatever they've lost, and it doesn't usually end up being enough. So, they need to break out of that habit. I'd suggest it's more of a mentality thing. They look like they've got the technical ability. They just need to cut out those errors and maybe sort out their reaction to certain events in the match. Because if they can react to, go in that period without scoring a little bit better, then I think that'll stand them in a lot better stead. Paddy made the point on the Pinkham podcast yesterday, actually, that it almost feels like they get to a certain point where they're like, we've dominated the game for however long, we haven't managed to score a goal, and it almost feels like they question themselves at that point. So I think they need to improve those sort of mentality elements, and they need to sort out whatever it is that's behind these patterns of performance in the last few games. And then they look like they could be a strong championship team, but it's just about whether they can sort that out in time for, if they do it too late, they're going to be out of the promotion race by the time they become a good championship team. So Dean Smith will hope that they can start that obviously from tomorrow, and we'll get stuck into that. But yeah, after Hull, I think it's just more frustration from Norwich City fans that they keep seeing the same issues.
Yeah, a bit of a sort of team news update on this one. Obviously, me, myself and Paddy were down at Colney this morning. Team news ahead of this one, obviously Jacob Sorensen is probably the most notable one there. Obviously went off injured against Hull on Saturday, and he was sort of the only left back really in the squad, in the sense that he's not actually a natural left back, but it's a position obviously that he's played before many times, and one he played against Birmingham in the cup game in the previous game. So not good news on that one. That's a stress fracture in his foot. Dean Smith didn't put a time frame on that, but said a number of weeks, which pretty much confirms that Norwich City are in the market now for another left back, which is something that I think we probably all expected to happen. It's probably not going to be anywhere near confirmed, obviously, before tomorrow night's game. So Smith is going to have to look in his squad and find someone to play there. But definitely one that I think we can keep our eyes on in the coming days for sort of ahead of that Millwall game. Well, Sam Byram looks like he might be back for that one, but he's obviously not going to be your natural left back. Only option for sort of the rest of that sustained period where they're going to be without other options. Timu Pukki, another one, a bruised foot. It was a shot he had in the 3rd minute. Smith quite hopeful on that one, but they were going to get a scan or an X-ray done this morning on that one, just to sort of confirm whether he's going to be available for tomorrow night. Adam Eder is back in training today, full training. Obviously not been available now pretty much since, was it like the Watford-Everton game, sort of that period of last season in the Premier League with various injuries, and he sort of played in the under-23s against Ipswich a few weeks back. But this looks like he's back in full training. Obviously not going to be available for either of the games this week, but certainly building up his fitness ahead of a return, which is very positive news in my opinion. Tony Springett, he's back here in action for the under-21s today, alongside Jonathan Tomkinson. Both of them going to get minutes. Smith has sort of stressed the need to get minutes under the belt for those two, because he's going to have to try and utilise his squad, especially with sort of the injuries and inevitable suspensions that will come over the course of the season. Obviously, then the other ones are all well known. One, Sam Mccallum, obviously out till the World Cup break. That's a foot injury. Yanulis, obviously ligament damage. That's 7 weeks, or 7-week window before this, so probably looking at about 6.5 weeks now. Jonathan Rowe, that's stress-related injury, no time frame on that. And Isaac Hayden, obviously, has been unavailable for the whole of pre-season, but Smith quite confident that he's soon going to be back amongst his squad. So, Sam, sort of that's all the team news. Obviously, I think Sorensen's going to be the point I'm going to pick up on here. Obviously, no real left back in this squad for tomorrow night's game. So, obviously, we saw Kenny McLean go and play there against Hull the other day, sort of for the last sort of 60 minutes or so of the game. So who are you going to be starting in at left back tomorrow night, or do you think that Smith might potentially sort of change up the system to maybe play three at the back to obviously kind of counteract that?
Yeah, I think that's the most likely solution. Ono Hernandez played at right wing back against Hibernian in pre-season. I know that was probably the least significant friendly of all of them, but it shows that Smith clearly feels he's capable in that role. And given he trusts him on the right, you'd think he'd be able to do that on the left, given actually when he's playing as a winger in his proper position. Hernandez does play on the left more than the right, actually. Alternatively, if he only feels he can play on the right, Max Aarons used to play as a left wing back fairly regularly, actually, under Daniel Farke. So I think they've got a couple of options there around trying a back five. I think if he goes with a back four, it will be Kenny McLean. I don't think you can really go with Ono Hernandez as a left back. I think that would be maybe just too attacking, a bit too gung ho, But we have seen them, play with 7 or 8 attacking midfielders. It feels like at times on the pitch this season. But I think that would be too much of a risk. So yeah, it's going to be, if it's not a change of system, he's just going to go for the most reliable person. And I think Kenny McLean, partly just from watching him, you can tell that, but especially from knowing how Dean Smith views him, he's one of the first names on the team sheet, and he's, Mr. Reliable as far as Smith's concerned. So I'm sure he wouldn't have any worries about McLean's capabilities of going in there and not making any mistakes. It's just about whether he'd sort of thrive, and that feels slightly less likely. I think alternatively, there's Ben Gibson, who Daniel Farke used to talk about as a potential left-back cover option, but I think the athleticism and the pace of that is just going to be a little bit too much for him, especially considering he's only played one competitive game since pre-season, and he missed a few games towards the end of pre-season as well. So I think getting up and down that left flank, especially with his should we say limited capabilities with regards to speed, I think that might be a little bit of a strange decision. So yeah, I think it's a choice between Kenny McLean and a back five with Ono Hernandez, really. But I have also sort of explored a couple of other options, and I don't want to plug too much because I know I already spoke about Tactics Board, but there will be a piece on the Pink and Plus app where we sort of look at a couple of those options as an academy left back as well. And I suppose these are the sort of times when, if you're in the under 21s, you're sort of wondering, if I don't get trusted now, am I ever going to sort of break into this first team? Because Smith's lost 2 left backs and a central midfielder who can play at left back. And, I think now's the sort of time where if he doesn't find a solution within the first team experienced players that he has in the squad, maybe he'll turn to that academy and those sort of under 21s and under 18s. The problem with it is it's probably going to have to be a fairly reliable solution going forwards, because even if they sign one left back, you've then got one left back to basically see them through to the World Cup, and they've probably got a couple of games before they can actually do that deal. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does things. I think they'll hope that they can just get away with it, really, given that it is the Championship and it's maybe less or maybe slightly more forgiving at times, and they might just be able to see it through with 10 players that they're comfortable with in those positions, and then one sort of filling a gap. But yeah, he's not got too many options, but they'll muddle through somehow, I'm sure.
Yeah, obviously worth stressing that Barley Mumba is not going to be able to be recalled. Paddy did ask Dean Smith that this morning. Done very well down there at Plymouth so far. I think his 3 man of the match performances on the bounce, and really looking like a prospect for the future, but arguably one that maybe if the injury crisis they'd have known was coming, one that might have stuck around and been given an opportunity. But moving on a little bit, Sam, obviously before we sort of delve into the comments, anyone who's watching us on any platforms, get your comments in, and me and Sam will try our best to answer them as much as possible. What will that maybe do for the midfield mix tomorrow night? Obviously, bearing in mind that Smith might have to change obviously options, or McLean, if he does drop into left back, then that's one of your midfield options. Obviously, Sorensen's played in midfield as well over the course of the opening 3 games. So are we going to expect maybe Gabriel Sara? Is this an opportunity for him? Obviously, we know that Smith said, that he's trying to build up his fitness, but is it potentially an opportunity for him tomorrow night, do you think? Yeah,
I think we will see Gabriel Sara. I don't know if you could really play him as a sole sort of number 6. I think if McLean was to go out to left back, you'd have to go with Gibbs, with Sarah alongside him, because as much as Sarah does have a slightly more physical profile, we saw from that Birmingham game he spent more time on the last defender than he did sort of shielding the back four. So I wouldn't see him as that type of player. But as you say, those midfield options are depleting, and quite a lot of them now are pretty much number 10. So for Sarah, who is a bit more of a number 8, I think they're going to want him in there for a little bit of balance. I just don't really see what alternative they have. Unless you're just going to go with Kenny McLean and then 2 sort of out and out number 10s, which I suppose is what they did at Hull. But I suppose that shows you, because they've looked like a team that lacks a defensive midfielder. Hull looked pretty dangerous on the counter. And this is a league where Norwich should be dominating. Look at the equivalent in sort of the Premier League, and Manchester City don't ever look really particularly threatened on the counter-attack. And that's probably because they've got some of the world's best defenders and defensive midfielders. Norwich look like a team that don't have that security. And I think that even if you are in possession and you're dominating games like Norwich expect to in almost every match in the Championship, you do need that little bit of cover. So I don't see a sort of dream midfield of Sarah, Nunez and Sinani or Cantwell or anything like that. I do think Sarah will feature, but either way, he's going to have to find a way of making that midfield slightly more balanced. And I think we'll see Kenny McLean or Liam Gibbs in that midfield, obviously partly depending on what he wants to do with the left-back situation, and also partly depending on how much trust he has in Liam Gibbs, because as impressive as he's been, he's still yet to start a league game. It's a little bit like that John Rowe situation. It felt like he had made so many cameos last season that he was like a bona fide first team player, and then you step back and you think actually he hasn't given him a start in the league yet. And it's a similar situation with Liam Gibbs. So there is still a big jump to be made in terms of trusting him with a start, but he's in with a better chance than ever before, given that injury situation.
Obviously, talking there about Sinani and Cantwell, I'm just intrigued to know what your thoughts are in terms of the attacking players. Obviously, Milot Rashica coming for a lot of criticism so far this season. Obviously, we know there's interest from the Bundesliga, notably a certain Daniel Farker and Borussia Mönchengladbach. We obviously believe there were scouts watching him in that game against Wigan. So what are you going to sort of do in terms of those front areas tomorrow? Obviously, we know that Teemu Pukki potentially missing for this one. Obviously, we kind of lacked the service to him so far this season. He looks like a very frustrated figure and a man who maybe doesn't look as interested in my eyes. So what are your thoughts on the attacking, maybe 3, or depending on obviously the formation that Smith has to go with in terms of who you'd start for tomorrow evening?
Sinani will feel that he has to start. I don't think anyone could begrudge Sinani for sitting there and thinking there's no way he isn't playing this week, because he was Norwich's best player against Birmingham by a little distance as well, I'd say. So and Smith actually praised in the press conference this morning his training as well. So in a way, after all that, you were sort of left scratching your head as to how he didn't start against Hull, let alone didn't even come on as a substitute. But I think Smith sees Sargent as maybe more of a, when he looks to the bench and Norwich need a goal and Hull are packed in and around the edge of the box, I think he sees Sargent as more of a direct option than Sinani, who would have just been another technical player amongst a sea of technical players that Norwich had on the pitch by that point. But yeah, I think he's been Norwich's most impressive actually of the creative players. And I know it's a smaller sample size. Todd Cantwell has played many minutes in a team where he looks like the only player that really wants to try and make something happen. So I do feel for him. I think he's been as impressive as probably a creative midfielder could be with their situation at times. But Sinani was part of Norwich's best performance this season, and he was the best player in that performance, and Smith's praised his training. So I don't see how he couldn't start. So I see that as probably one of the winger positions, because Rashica really hasn't done enough to keep hold of that shirt, and Smith has. I totally understand Smith's patience keeping Rashica around because of his reputation and because of, we didn't see full Rashica realising his potential in a Norwich shirt last season, but we did see signs of what a good player he could be, and there were signs of talent that there maybe weren't in the rest of the Norwich squad. But he's had now, three championship games, 3 good outings against teams where, judging by his reputation and his talent, he should be walking it, really. He should be the most impressive player on the pitch, and he hasn't come close. So I think it's time for him maybe to drop out, maybe even have a rest and just get out of the cycle of struggling in championship games and just watch one and just be able to sort of relax and then come back in with that enthusiasm, because he looks like the sort of player that once he gets that enthusiasm, once he's keen to run at defenders and he wants to make something happen, he can do that. So I think that a game out of the team would help him, and also Sinani certainly deserves a start. In terms of the striker position, it's a difficult one. Although Hugo had an impressive pre-season, I still don't think he's got the quality technically to be part of a team that it looks like Norwich are shifting towards a more possession-based sort of passing team, and I don't think Hugo really suits that. Although he was impressive in that Birmingham game, to be fair. And Sargent, I mean, we all know Sargent's deficiencies there. Technically, he's been very poor in a Norwich shirt, and he doesn't really suit that system either. So I think it's actually a good. While you were saying that, I thought brilliant time for Adam Eder to be coming back into team training, because they really do need that slightly more technical option. I know he's more physical than Tamer Pukki, but I'd say out of him, Hugo and Sargent, he is the most technically capable. And I think if he can get match fit quickly, he's probably the most logical option in terms of the style of play that they've been trying to deploy for the last few games. So it will be interesting to see how they go with that front three, because that's been one of the constants in a all change Norwich team throughout the season. Really, he's gone with Rashica Cantwell and Pukki for all 3 games. But he may well be forced into a change, both by performances and by this worrying Tamer Pukki diagnosis. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he changes, and it looks like something almost certainly will change.
Yeah, I saw a table yesterday that, based on expected goals, Norwich should be top of the Championship, and there's a few questions already coming through that kind of link to that. Terry Wogan TV, great name. I said that on Friday. Ultimately, dominating games statistically means nothing without results. I suspect Smith needs 4 points from the next 2, or is getting toxic very fast. I think you only got to take the gauge off social media on Saturday, and even this morning off the press conference comments. There is a kind of a bit of a divide now. A few fans starting to feel that Dean Smith's not the man. Toby Mills also kind of picking up a little bit on that point. I'm actually in agreement with Smith. Performances are improving, which I think I can probably agree with that. But we need to be more clinical, which again is factually correct. The defensive mistakes will stop when the players get over their Premier League hangover. So, Sam, what do you read into stats? Obviously, you're the man for stats on our Pink and team. You do your tactics for video. XG, expected goals, do you really read anything into that? Obviously, we know that the lack of clinical nature or clinical edge in this Norwich City team is starting to become a little bit concerning. 2 goals from the opening 3 games against, 3 pretty average Championship teams. No disrespect to any of those, but alarming that maybe Norwich are struggling to put the ball in the back of the net against these teams, or do you think that it's going to come as we're starting to see these performances and Norwich creating chances more and more in these games?
I'm always a big defender of XG, because I think if it gets to the point where those things aren't important, then probably we're going to be out of a job if people don't want to talk about and analyse football. But no, in all seriousness, I think it would be more worrying if they weren't producing any sort of XG. Did a bit of research ahead of the Tactics Board video, and I actually found that it would have taken 286 minutes in possession, that is against Cardiff, for them to create 1 goal's worth of XG. So they're clearly improving that quite a lot. It got up to actually 1 XG per sort of 26 minutes, I think, by the end of that whole game. So you can see that progression. And I was more worried about the chance creation than the finishing ability, to be honest. These are professional footballers, and although it is worrying, you'd always back them at some point to sort those issues out. They're on enormous amounts of money because of their talent and their technical ability, and you'd certainly back them at some stage to sort that out. So I think it is actually, that's a positive point, to be honest, and that's probably something Dean Smith could use to defend his team and push his point that there are improving performances. Unfortunately, as people on the other side of XG to me that maybe aren't particularly huge fans of it would always say, doesn't count for anything though, and you need to put the ball in the back of the net. And it comes back to that point really of, yes, it looks like they're getting better, and they're probably going to end up at the end of the season, I think they are going to be a really good Championship team. But it's just about, you need to not waste too many opportunities to get points, because if it gets 10, 15, 20 games into the season and we're still saying, oh, but they look like they're going to get really good soon, it could be that by that point they're 18th or 19th and they're out of the promotion race. So they need to, as much as the XG is encouraging, and I would see that as a positive, it's all talk for now, because they haven't actually put the points on the board yet. They haven't actually scored the goals in a game to win that game. And with Tamer Pukki potentially injured, I think that's a little bit of a worry. Although, you know, I imagine he's probably responsible for a good amount of that XG. Hasn't been maybe as clinical as he was in the Championship 2 years ago or 4 years ago. So I think he needs to up that output. But you know, I would always see it as encouraging that they're producing strong XG numbers. You know, it's just about being better in both boxes, to be honest.
Smith this morning saying that he feels that Norwich are hard to beat, which obviously is divided opinion on Twitter so far this morning after I sort of posted the video out on our Twitter page. And I'm more interested really, Sam, on the Premier League hangover comment. It's something that was aimed again at Dean Smith this morning. Is this Norwich City team suffering from the Premier League and obviously that losing culture that was so ingrained within them? Obviously, we've seen 4 new arrivals, but you can argue that they haven't really, well, across the board, haven't really featured. Obviously, Hayden yet to feature, Sarah kind of just that cup appearance and the odd appearance off the bench, and obviously Ramsey just that sort of short spell off the bench in the cup game and on Saturday against Hull. Only Nunes really the man who's really been given an opportunity. So how do you sort of feel in terms of, is it the lack of turnover within this squad that's maybe mentally the players aren't prepared for the Championship, or do you feel that eventually it will come because we are starting to see performances improving?
Yeah, I think it's a tough balancing act because Norwich went all out to change their squad the last time they, you know, when they got promoted last year, and it went really poorly for them. The players didn't really gel. The transfer risks they took didn't really pay off, and it was basically an example in why you shouldn't do those sorts of overhauls. But maybe that shows why they should have done it this summer, because at that point they were on a high and they basically dismantled all the momentum they had by changing. You know, they lost the 2 most vital ingredients of that team in Ollie Skip and Amy Buendia, and you know, replaced it with a team that needed a little bit of time to gel. So maybe, you know, from a sort of, from a reversal point of view, they should have actually done it the other way around. But I always think it is a bit of a risk to go in with a, you know, just a sort of almost a random squad. We've seen it go particularly poorly for Fulham, who really went all out on the spending a few years ago and got relegated. Nottingham Forest have obviously tried it upon promotion, so it's something you see more regularly upon teams getting promoted. It didn't work for Norwich City, and maybe that has sort of stung them enough to not want to do it again this summer. That might have been a factor. I'm not totally sure, but I think the mentality is certainly a problem. It really does look like it is, because we got to a point last season where the first goal went in, and rightfully, you know, I'm not saying players should give up, but it actually was a safe assumption once that goal went in that was going to be that, because Norwich were so poor compared to the rest of the league that once they went 1-0 down, you knew there wasn't a good chance of coming back. But the problem is now that mentality has almost stayed, and you can still feel that huge deflation in the air, almost, you know, the balloon bursting in Carrow Road when that goal goes in. But it actually isn't that big of a problem for them in the Championship, and it shouldn't be, because they've got enough to score 2 goals against most of these teams, as they've shown with the XG. But it's just about that 10, 15, 20-minute period after the goal. And luckily against Wigan, it didn't cost them a goal, but against Hull, arguably that deflation and that failure to bring themselves back up again after conceding the first goal in such poor fashion, that's what cost them the second goal, and that's what cost them the ability to equalise and then go on and try and win the game. So I certainly feel there is one there. Obviously, Dean Smith is closer to his players, but I can't imagine he would be coming out in the press conference and saying, yeah, there's a Premier League hangover. You know, take everything with a pinch of salt from a sort of press conference standpoint. But, you know, as you say, only one of the 4 new signings has really featured significantly. And Isaac Hayden is going to be a big player for them when he comes back from injury. So I think you have to judge that mentality once those players integrate. You know, looking at the players they've brought in, you are probably going to see three of those players in the starting 11 once Smith is able to field his best team, and they are going to be in the spine of the team as well. So I think they could have a big impact on the psychology of the team, and that would be a big positive, because they do really look like a team that is struggling to cope with setbacks at the moment. And that's understandable because of the, as you referenced, the losing culture. You know, not only last year, but they haven't had to concede a goal in front of fans. They haven't had to see their fans disappointed for, or they haven't been able to please their fans in person for 4 years, and they probably do need that moment. They need to get back on the horse in terms of winning and coming back against Championship teams, just to show themselves really that they can do it.
Yeah, before we delve into the comments, we'll probably be live for about another 10 minutes. So if you've got any more questions, get them in the comments section and we'll get round to them. Just final question before we do that, Sam. What are your thoughts on Huddersfield? Obviously, they got their first win on Saturday, a 3-1 home victory over Stoke. But prior to that, they lost 1-0 to Burnley and 2-1 to Birmingham. Obviously, we watched their opening game against Burnley in a hotel in Swindon, which is just what we do with the job that we're in. What are your sort of thoughts on Huddersfield? Obviously, they're kind of trying to build from last season. Obviously, they made it to the playoff final, got beaten by Nottingham Forest, and they've had a couple of their players poached. Daniel Sinani obviously come back to Norwich, and Harry Toffolo and Lewis O'Brien have both ended up at Nottingham Forest, who got obviously their maiden Premier League win yesterday afternoon against West Ham. So, general thoughts on Huddersfield and what they can bring to Carrow Road tomorrow evening, and what Norwich need to maybe do to counteract that.
Yeah, I was surprised that they got that win over Stoke, to be honest, and it's probably not what Huddersfield fans want to hear, but I really thought they were going to have a difficult... I mean, they could still have a difficult season after, obviously, Carlos Corberán walked out. They've not done good transfer business at all. And to be honest, they looked fairly... you wouldn't have predicted them to be in the position they were in last season. I think it was that shows you how important the playoff final can be, because it was such a fine balancing act between them winning that game. It was 1 goal difference between them being now a Premier League side and being a Championship side that look like they're going to struggle. They've lost a lot of players, as you said. Three key players in O'Brien, Toffolo and Sinani. And I think it probably is going to be a difficult season for them. But I said that about Cardiff and Wigan, and I'm not sure Hull are going to be competing for the automatic promotion places. So, who knows? They're going to be a Championship side. They're going to come to Carrow Road and fight, and they're going to be up for it. They're not going to roll over. It's not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination for Norwich, and they'd be very poor to underestimate Huddersfield, who, let's be honest, didn't look much worse of a side than Norwich last season. While Norwich were finishing with 22 points, they were up towards the top end of the Championship. So, I think they'll provide a stern test. There are rarely easy games in the Championship. I don't think it's a Premier League situation where you can say there are no easy games, but you're unwise to ever bet on an easy game in the Championship, and they showed against Stoke what they can do, and Stoke are a decent team. So to put 3 past them, you wouldn't rule it out against Norwich, who have looked pretty error prone defensively this season. So I'm interested to see what they bring to Carrow Road, what sort of style they bring to Carrow Road. Could be quite a good game if there's still elements of that Corberán style. But yeah, I don't expect to see them up towards the top end of the Championship, to be totally honest with you. But it does look like a weak league this season, so who knows what they can achieve. And I'm sure their fans have still got a little bit of hope after the surprise they managed to pull off for most of last season.
Yeah, we'll delve into the comments now. Obviously, the left-back issue, I suppose, is probably the most pertinent one amongst fans at the moment. And Jonathan Harrison's made the comment, I see Sean Stewart from under-23s is an attacking fullback. I think you kind of said you looked into the under-23s ahead of your tactics board video. Is Sean Stewart a man you've looked at, Sam? And what have you sort of made of him? I mean, I watched him a couple of times last season in the under-23s. I remember one against down at Kings Lynn against West Brom, I believe it was. And I was very impressed with him that evening. Looks like a very sturdy fullback, obviously only 19 years of age. But is he someone you could see potentially getting an opportunity, Sam?
Yeah, he's quite highly rated in the club, actually. I think they see a strong future for him. I think he's actually, I think he's Northern Irish. He's got some, I think he's got some youth international appearances as well. So he's clearly one that's highly rated. And they see a strong future for him, not only within the club, but externally, other football professionals. So, yeah, I think he's one that in future will maybe do something, but it does take a lot for them. And there's examples of it previously. Even Daniel Varga, who was championed for his treatment of young players and his ability to bring young players through for Norwich. It took a lot for him to commit to bringing an academy player into the first team group. You look at Rob Nizze, who actually played some friendlies last summer. He was a left back, played really, really well, I thought, and I really liked him, but they still sold him. The bar is so high and the level is so different between under-21s and senior football that even if they look fantastic in the under-21s, that doesn't even necessarily mean that they're good enough to make the bench for Norwich, to be honest. So it's always difficult to gauge. And I think there are people, the ability to gauge the difference between what you look like in a youth setup or in the under-21s league, I think that's actually a really key skill for people sort of in the academy and in and around the decision-making process as to who goes up there. Because for me, and I've watched quite a lot of under-21s and under-23s football, and it's still quite difficult for me to pick out which player is going to do what, because it's just so different. So if they, I've been told they rate him very highly, and that usually means that they could see him bursting into the first team at some stage. But I don't think he's been part of the group that was sort of actively in the first team in first team training in pre-season. So might be a little bit of a jump, but needs must, and it could be that their hand is forced with that. He is the regular starting left back for the under-21, so if you're going to go to the academy, he would be the go-to choice. But we'll see if they want to do that, or if they want to go with a more experienced head like Kenny McLean, or obviously just switching system.
Yeah, probably one to check as well. So the under-21s are playing this afternoon, aren't they, against Leeds? So probably one to see whether he's in that squad. A few comments here on Pukki.
Yeah. Sorry, worth pointing out, he's not started actually. Should have just had a look. Yeah, he's not started for Norwich's under-21s. He's on the bench, but make of that what you will.
Yeah, a few comments here on Pukki. Obviously, Richard Clark here on Facebook. Pukki seems to be out wide a lot more this season. I don't recall him missing any chances we'd expect him to score. He needs to stay more central and let Nunes feed him. Obviously, we had that chance against Wigan that clattered off the crossbar. Very unlucky with that one. But more pertinent, this question here from Ivan Easter. Although Pukki's been a good asset over the seasons, do you think now that Norwich should be looking for a replacement for him in January window and use Pukki in the second half, as now he seems to be less sharp probably than what he was? I feel like we don't have a prolific striker at the moment. I suppose this probably links back to the Adamida point. He's obviously the man that, for me, they're missing quite desperately at the moment. He's quite dynamic, he's big, he's strong, he's probably what you want in a championship forward. And Pukki does seem very, very isolated and very frustrated at the moment. So what do you make of that one, Sam? Obviously, I think Pukki's contract obviously running out as well next summer. Probably expecting him maybe one that would be looking to move on, especially if they're staying in the championship. So January window, want to see Norwich do some business up top?
Yeah, I think they've got to start planning ahead, and if they don't do something in January, they've got to at least have a target in place. It could be an Emi Buendia type situation where they actually pretty much do the deal in January and then just confirm it in the summer. Because when you're going to lose a player that's been so integral to the system and to the club for such a good amount of time, you really do need to plan ahead, and I think that's what they learned to their cost with Emi Buendia. It's taken them a year or over a year to find what looks like somebody close to his quote unquote replacement in Marcelino Nunes. So they probably do need to really plan ahead with that. I'd agree with the assessment of Pukki's performance a little bit. He did have a chance against Hull, which I would have absolutely expected him to score. After Nunes had that, he pressed, won the ball back, and then had a shot saved. It fell to Pukki, and he should be scoring. It's pretty much him, and he's just got to avoid the two defenders, and it's an empty goal. But you said earlier that he looked slightly disinterested, and I'd go along with that. Actually, the pressing doesn't look anywhere near as ferocious or enthusiastic as it did at times under Daniel Farke in that 2018-19 season. You could probably raise his age for that point, but that's not a valid excuse. That's if his age is preventing him from pressing, then get somebody else in that's younger and can do it. But it maybe is harsh to doubt him. There have been times before where it's been much worse than this, and he's had goal droughts much worse than this, and played with what looks like zero confidence. I think that was the case in the second half of the 2019-20 season. Then he came back and was one of the best strikers in the championship immediately afterwards, fired Norwich, along with Emi Buendia to championship promotion. So I don't think it pays to ever doubt Teemu Pukki in a Norwich shirt, but with the point of replacement, we know that he's not averse to the possibility of leaving this summer. It doesn't look like it's going to happen, but if he had been allowed, he would have absolutely explored that possibility. And unless they get promoted, if they don't get promoted, I certainly see him leaving. And if they do, there's probably an interesting conversation to be had around wages and how much of those can be shelled out to keep him at the club. But they really do need to start thinking about how they're going to replace him. And we know how far ahead they plan in advance. I'm sure they've already got a list of 10 names that could replace him. But yeah, I'm sure we'll see some movement on that either in January or next summer.
Before I come around to the all-important score prediction question, Sam, Emma's asking on Facebook, get the comment up, do you think there'll be any players leaving? I think this is probably inevitable that there will be. In terms of names, Sam, is there anyone on sort of that squad list at the minute when you look down on a match day program and you think, yeah, I'm not expecting him to be here before the end of the window? Obviously, I suppose Milot Rashica, Max Aarons is always going to be transfer links around those two. That's inevitable just due to the nature of their CVs. Anybody else maybe on that list that you sort of think, yeah, that I'm not expecting him to be here at the end of the window?
Yeah, those two players are the front line, and out of those two, I think you can probably see Rashica. You can see that possibility quite a lot more than you could with Aarons. But around the edges, I think you need a couple more games to assess who's not getting into the squad. I think if there's a player that doesn't get into the next 3 or 4 squads, that could well be a good indicator. There's also the young player elements. I think for some reason in pre-season it was difficult. It looked like and felt like John Rowe and Tony Springett would be in and around those positions, but now it looks quite stacked in terms of the options they have there, and especially if the likes of Rashica aren't going to be leaving. I struggled to see John Rowe and Tony Springett playing really significant roles. Obviously, you'd think Rowe is going to struggle to find a loan given his injury situation. That might be one for January. But if Tony Springett can't find a way into the matchday squad for the next 5 or 6 games, it could be a case of him going out, and I think there will be a couple of players around the edges as well. Young players or players who maybe are towards the lower end of the plans that will or could leave. But I don't expect the same sort of swinging levels of departures as we had a few weeks ago. I remember there were a couple of weeks when it felt like there were Norwich players leaving every day. But I don't see that sort of consistency of departure from now on. I think they've got a decently sized squad, and they'll only sanction a departure if they feel either that they don't need the person or that they can replace them. So not too many. But yeah, I think the young players are maybe ones to look out for loans. I'd say just maybe make a note of the players that aren't making the matchday squad, and with every matchday squad they don't make, they're more likely to leave Carrow Road, is what I'd say.
I think, Sam, before we wrap the show up, the inevitable question, Elliot Pearson's asked it as well. Score predictions, and how do you see this one going, Sam? Are Norwich City going to register their first victory of the season tomorrow night?
It is hard to bet on Norwich at this point, to be honest. So I will play it safe and go for a draw, which I think I do genuinely think that's going to be the result. I think there's some that might bottle it a little bit and go for a draw, but I think this is genuinely what's going to happen. Just to see Norwich in the lead would be quite exciting, to see them trying to hold on to something. But I think 1-1 is just always a safe bet in the Championship. It just feels like every game, when you go, every single game feels like it's going to be a fairly average 1-1 when you're in the Championship. So yeah, I'll go for that. What about you?
Maybe slightly delusional, but I'm going for a 2-1 Norwich. I fancy us tomorrow night. I just think we need to get that first win, and this feels like a really big week for Norwich and Dean Smith particularly, just to really register at least, well, they need a minimum of 4 points up. I'd say really 6 from these next 2 home games, just to kind of turn that tide and maybe eradicate the negativity that there is amongst the club at the moment. Obviously, the injury issues in terms of the fullback position and other positions in the squad maybe is a bit of an issue, and I think a lot will depend on whether Timu Pukki is available for this one. But yeah, I'll fancy us. I think there's progression despite the defeat the other day. There's still positive signs. So I'm going to go 2-1 Norwich. I don't think Huddersfield are too much to be feared, but that could definitely come back and bite me on the bum tomorrow evening. So I think we'll round off the show there. Thanks for watching, everybody. Obviously, all the usual pre-match content is across our channels at the moment. We got the Dean Smith press conference video from this morning, and obviously all the articles that go across our channels as well. Based around that, obviously you're about to record the tactics board video, which that will obviously be live for all our Pink and Plus subscribers later on this afternoon, and then tomorrow evening. Myself, you, Paddy, and Connor will all be at Carrow Road to cover this one. So all your usual pre-match build-up, all of your post-match reaction or your post-match analysis, and all of that will obviously be across our channels, and obviously you'll be out speaking to fans. So if there's anybody watching this that wants to get an interview, obviously DM Sam on Twitter. We're trying to sort of build up the fan reaction across our channels. So if there's something you really want to vent on our channels and get it out there on social media, then obviously that's a good route to do that. So enjoy the rest of your Monday. Keep it locked across the Pink and the Pink and Plus channels. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your Monday. Enjoy the rest of your week. And fingers crossed, Norwich City can get 6 points this week. But ideally, a win tomorrow night would be nice. Thanks for joining us.